The autumn breeze carried the scent of caramel apples and cotton candy across the community fair as Sarah Parker adjusted her daughter Lily's red wool hat. The 3-year-old girl had been unusually quiet all morning, her large brown eyes taking in the whirl of colors and sounds with a solemn intensity that sometimes worried her mother. Lily's pediatrician had assured Sarah that some children simply observed before participating, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something more was happening behind those thoughtful eyes. "Would you like to see the petting zoo, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, kneeling to Lily's level. The little girl shook her head, her attention suddenly captured by something across the fairground. Sarah followed her daughter's gaze to the local police department's demonstration booth, where Officer James Wilson stood beside a magnificent German shepherd with alert ears and an intelligent face. The fair had transformed Central Park into a maze of booths, games, and food vendors. Local businesses showcased their services while children darted between attractions, their laughter mingling with carnival music. Sarah had brought Lily hopping the stimulation might encourage her to speak more. At 3, Lily had a vocabulary of fewer than 15 words, far behind her peers, according to the speech therapist they visited monthly. "That's a police dog, Lily. He helps the officers catch bad guys," Sarah explained, surprised when Lily began walking determinedly toward the K-9 unit. For a child who typically hid behind her mother's legs around strangers, this sudden boldness was unexpected. Officer Wilson noticed the approaching pair and smiled warmly. At 36, he had the weathered face of someone who had seen both the best and worst of humanity, but his eyes remained kind. The dog at his side sat perfectly still, his posture alert but calm. "Good morning," Officer Wilson greeted them. "This little one seems interested in Max." Sarah nodded, gently placing her hands on Lily's shoulders. "She's never shown much interest in animals before. Is it okay if we say hello?" "This is Max," Officer Wilson said, noticing Lily's fascination. "He's 5 years old and specializes in search and rescue. I'm afraid he's working right now, so we can't pet him without permission." A small crowd had gathered around the police department's booth, where a display board showed photos of the K-9 unit in action. Max finding lost hikers, discovering evidence at crime scenes, and participating in community outreach programs at local schools. Officer Wilson had been explaining Max's training to visitors all morning, but something about this small, solemn-faced girl made him pause. "Max and I have been partners for 4 years, he continued, addressing Lily directly rather than speaking over her head to her mother. "He can find people who are lost in the woods or hidden in buildings. His nose is so powerful he can track a scent that's days old." Lily didn't respond but remained utterly still, her gaze locked with the German shepherd's. Sarah was about to apologize for her daughter's silence when something extraordinary happened. Lily, who had been diagnosed with a speech delay and rarely strung 2 words together, looked directly into the dog's amber eyes and said clearly, "Hi, Max." The words hung in the air like a small miracle. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Officer Wilson glanced at her reaction, immediately understanding the significance of the moment. "Well, hello there," he replied gently to Lily, as though they were having the most normal conversation in the world. "Max is very pleased to meet you." What happened next would change everything. Max, a dog trained to maintain perfect discipline while on duty, suddenly broke protocol. He whined softly and moved forward, nudging Lily's jacket with his nose. Officer Wilson called him back with a sharp command, but for the first time in their 4 years working together, Max disobeyed. The German shepherd circled Lily once, then sat directly in front of her, his posture assuming what Officer Wilson recognized as his alert position, the stance he took when he'd found what he was searching for. A chill ran down Officer Wilson's spine. In their years of service, Max had never given a false alert, not during training and certainly not during actual operations. "I'm so sorry," Sarah began, reaching for Lily's hand. "We didn't mean to distract your dog." Officer Wilson shook his head, a puzzled expression crossing his face. "No, this is unusual. This is behavior he only shows during specific detection exercises." He hesitated before asking, "Has Lily been feeling all right lately?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She thought about the past few weeks, how Lily had been napping more frequently, how she'd noticed small bruises on her daughter's legs after bath time, how the pediatrician had dismissed her concerns at their last checkup. "She's been a little tired, and I've noticed some bruising on her legs, but the doctor said it was normal for active toddlers." She didn't mention her own sleepless nights worrying, the way she'd photographed the bruises to track their healing, the nagging fear she dismissed as new mother paranoia. Officer Wilson's expression turned serious. "Mrs. Parker, I don't want to alarm you, but Max is trained in scent detection. Sometimes, certain medical conditions change a person's scent in ways that dogs can detect." He handed Sarah a card. "This is my number. I think it would be worth getting Lily checked by a specialist, just to be safe." Sarah stared at the business card in her hand, a sense of dread and hope mingling in her chest. Around them, the fair continued, children laughing on rides, vendors calling out to passing customers, music playing from the carousel. But in that small space between a mother, her daughter, a police officer, and his extraordinary dog, something profound had shifted. Lily, seemingly unaware of the adult's concern, reached out a small hand toward Max. Officer Wilson, breaking protocol for the first time in his career, gave a subtle nod. The German Shepherd gently pressed his muzzle against Lily's palm in a gesture that seemed almost reverent. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was thanking, Officer Wilson, Max, or whatever force had brought them to this booth on this particular autumn day. She tucked the business card carefully into her purse, a small piece of paper that would soon become the first step on an unexpected journey. As they walked away from the booth, Lily looked back over her shoulder at Max, who watched her with an intensity that transcended his training. Neither the child nor the dog could possibly understand what their brief connection had set in motion, how two simple words and an inexplicable animal instinct were about to change not just their lives, but potentially thousands more. Sarah Parker couldn't stop thinking about the police dog's reaction to Lily. For 3 days, Officer Wilson's business card sat on her kitchen counter, catching the morning light as she prepared Lily's breakfast, taunting her during quiet afternoon hours while her daughter napped. Was she overreacting to a simple coincidence? Was she looking for problems where none existed? On the 4th morning, as she helped Lily dress, Sarah noticed new bruises on her daughter's arms, small, circular marks that hadn't been there the night before. Lily hadn't fallen. She hadn't bumped into furniture. The bruises seemed to appear from nowhere, like watercolor blooms on pale canvas. Sarah made the call. Officer Wilson answered immediately. "I've been hopping to hear from you, Mrs. Parker." "Please call me Sarah," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was wondering if you really think there's something wrong with Lily." There was a pause before he answered. "I can't make any medical claims. I'm not a doctor, but in my 8 years working with detection dogs, I've never seen Max behave like that without cause." By that afternoon, Sarah sat in doctor waiting room, Lily quietly coloring beside her. Sarah had requested this particular pediatrician, not their regular doctor who had dismissed her concerns, but one recommended by a mother's group for her thoroughness. Doctor was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened without interruption as Sarah explained about the fair, Max's reaction, and the mysterious bruises. "Let's have a look at Lily, shall we?" Doctor said, her voice warm but her expression giving nothing away. The examination was gentle but comprehensive. Doctor checked Lily's lymph nodes, gently pressed on her abdomen, examined the bruises, and observed her walking across the examination room. When she suggested blood tests, Sarah nodded, grateful that someone was finally taking her concerns seriously. "It's probably nothing," Doctor said, though her eyes didn't quite match her reassuring words. "But it's always better to check thoroughly." 2 days later, Sarah's phone rang. Doctor asked her to come to the office without Lily. The waiting room felt different this time, colder, starker. Sarah's hands trembled as she clasped them in her lap, watching the minute hand of the wall clock tick forward with agonizing slowness. When the nurse called her name, her legs felt numb as she followed the white-coated figure down the corridor. Doctor wasn't alone. A second doctor, introduced as Doctor, sat beside her desk. The presence of an oncologist told Sarah everything before a single word was spoken. "Acute lymphoblastic leukemia," Doctor said gently. The blood tests showed abnormalities, and Doctor confirmed with additional testing. Sarah heard the words as though from underwater, distorted and distant. Leukemia, cancer, her 3-year-old daughter. The room seemed to tilt. "Mrs. Parker, Sarah, I need you to hear something important," Doctor said, leaning forward. "We've caught this extraordinarily early. Most children aren't diagnosed until the symptoms become much more pronounced. The early detection gives Lily a significantly better prognosis." Sarah forced herself to focus. How? How did you catch it so early?" The doctors exchanged glances. "That's what's remarkable," Doctor replied. "Your story about the police dog prompted immediate testing we might not have done for months. Lily's symptoms are so subtle they would typically be missed at this stage. The bruising is minor, her fatigue could be attributed to normal childhood development, and there's barely any lymph node enlargement." Doctor nodded in agreement. "In all my years of practice, I've never seen all diagnosed this early without a family history prompting testing. May I ask you something unusual? Would it be possible to speak with this police officer and his dog?" That evening, after leaving Lily with her sister, Sarah sat in her car in the hospital parking lot, letting the tears come. She cried until her throat hurt, until her eyes burned, until the initial shock and terror had poured out enough for her to think clearly again. Then she called Officer Wilson. He arrived at the hospital the following morning in civilian clothes, Max walking perfectly at his side. Doctor had arranged for them to meet in a small conference room rather than his office. "First, I want to thank you," Doctor began. "Because of your dog's reaction and your decision to speak up, we've caught Lily's condition at an unusually early stage." Officer Wilson nodded solemnly. "I'm just relieved you found what was wrong. How is Lily doing?" "She'll begin treatment next week," Sarah replied, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "The doctors say her chances are excellent because we caught it so early." Doctor leaned forward. "Mr. Wilson, I've read about dogs detecting certain cancers, but mostly in controlled research settings. Has Max had any specific training in this area?" Officer Wilson shook his head. "No, sir. Max is trained in narcotics detection, search and rescue, and suspect apprehension. He's never been trained to detect medical conditions." Doctor's interest visibly increased. Yet he clearly reacted to something in Lily. There's growing research suggesting that certain cancers and blood disorders create volatile compounds that dogs can smell. Would you and Max be willing to participate in some controlled tests? It could help us understand what he detected. Before Officer Wilson could respond, the door opened and Doctor entered. With her sharp eyes, practical bob of chestnut hair, and brisk manner, she contrasted with Doctor's gentle approach. "Sorry I'm late," she announced. "Traffic was impossible." She extended her hand to Officer Wilson. "Doctor, Medical Detection Research Program. When Doctor called me about your dog, I drove straight from the university." Doctor spent 20 minutes questioning Officer Wilson about Max's training, his accuracy rates in his official duties, and his behavior with Lily. She took notes rapidly, occasionally nodding to herself. "Here's what I propose," she finally said. "A simple initial test. I've brought sample containers from 5 patients, 4 healthy controls and 1 with early-stage leukemia similar to Lily's. If Max can identify the sample from the leukemia patient without training, that would be significant. The test was set up in an empty examination room. 5 identical sealed containers were arranged in a line on the floor. Only Doctor knew which contained the leukemia sample. Officer Wilson led Max into the room, giving him the command to find. Max methodically sniffed each container, showing no interest in the first 3. At the 4th, he sat abruptly and looked up at Officer Wilson, his alert position. Doctor's expression changed from professional interest to barely contained excitement. "That's the one," she said quietly. Officer Wilson rewarded Max with enthusiastic praise and his favorite toy. As the German Shepherd happily chewed on the rubber ball, the adults exchanged looks of wonder. "One successful test doesn't prove anything scientifically," Doctor cautioned, though her eyes shone. "But it's enough to justify further investigation. Mr. Wilson, would you and Max be willing to participate in a more rigorous study? What we learn could potentially help many other children." As Sarah watched Officer Wilson nod in agreement, she felt the first small spark of something beyond fear, a sense that Lily's diagnosis, devastating as it was, might somehow lead to something meaningful, something that might save other parents from receiving the news too late. Outside the window, autumn leaves drifted down from the trees lining the hospital parking lot. Inside, in a sterile examination room, a small revolution in early cancer detection had just begun with a police dog, a rubber ball, and the hope that something good might yet emerge from the darkest moment of a mother's life. Lily Parker's first day of chemotherapy fell on a Tuesday in late October. The pediatric oncology ward at Memorial Hospital was painted in cheerful colors with cartoon characters marching across the walls, but nothing could fully disguise its purpose. Sarah held Lily's small hand as the nurse inserted the IV line, murmuring reassurances that fell hollow against her own fear. "You're doing so well, sweetheart," Sarah said, smoothing Lily's fine brown hair. The doctors had explained that it would likely fall out within weeks. Sarah had already purchased tiny knitted hats in rainbow colors, preparing for the visible marks of the battle they'd begun. Doctor checked in throughout the first treatment, his gentle manner a comfort to both mother and child. "Everything's going just as expected," he assured Sarah. "Lily's responding well." What he didn't say, what he didn't need to, was that the hardest days still lay ahead. The treatment that would save Lily's life would first make her sicker than the disease itself. As the medication dripped steadily into Lily's veins, a soft knock sounded on the door. Officer James Wilson stood in the doorway, still in uniform but without his partner. "I hope it's all right that I came," he said, suddenly looking uncertain. "I wanted to see how Lily was doing." Sarah gestured for him to enter. "Of course, please come in." Lily, drowsy from the pre-treatment medication, opened her eyes at the sound of his voice. "Max?" she asked, the disappointment evident even in that single word. Officer Wilson smiled apologetically. "He couldn't come today, hospital rules, but he sent you something." From behind his back he produced a small stuffed German Shepherd, remarkably similar to Max. "This is Mini Max. He'll stay with you when the real Max can't be here." Lily accepted the toy with solemn gravity, clutching it to her chest. "Thank you," she said clearly, another complete phrase that made Sarah's heart leap despite their circumstances. Officer Wilson stayed for an hour, telling Lily stories about Max's adventures, how he had once found a lost hiker in the state park, how he had tracked down a missing child who had wandered away from a campsite, how he could find hidden objects with just his nose. As he spoke, Sarah noticed Lily's eyes growing heavier until she finally drifted to sleep, Mini Max tucked securely under her arm. "You didn't have to come," Sarah said softly as they stepped into the hallway. "But I'm glad you did. It's the first time she's relaxed all day." Officer Wilson looked through the doorway at the sleeping child. Doctor called this morning. The hospital administration has given preliminary approval for Max to visit Lily here once a week as part of the study. They're calling it therapeutic interaction observation. But really, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Max has been different since he met Lily. He keeps looking for her when we're on patrol. I think he needs these visits as much as she might. 3 days after her first treatment, Lily developed a fever, an expected but dangerous side effect as the chemotherapy compromised her immune system. She was admitted to the hospital's isolation unit, her small body burning with infection as antibiotics flowed alongside the cancer medications. Sarah, who hadn't left her daughter's side, was dozing in a chair when a commotion in the hallway roused her. Doctor was arguing with a nurse outside Lily's room. "The study has been approved," Doctor insisted. "The dog has been bathed with antimicrobial shampoo, and Officer Wilson is following all sterile protocols." "It's against isolation policy," the nurse countered. "No animals in the isolation ward, that's absolute." "Is everything all right?" Sarah asked, stepping into the hallway. Doctor turned, her expression softening. "Mrs. Parker, I apologize for the disturbance. We brought Max for his scheduled visit with Lily, but there's some confusion about isolation protocols." Before Sarah could respond, Doctor appeared, having overheard the discussion. After reviewing Max's recent veterinary records and the study parameters, he made an unprecedented decision. "I'm authorizing this visit as her attending physician," he declared. "Under strict protocols, Officer Wilson must wear full protective gear, the dog must be draped with a sterile covering except for his head, and the visit is limited to 15 minutes. 30 minutes later, Lily opened her eyes to find Max sitting beside her bed, his intelligent eyes focused on her face, his body draped in a light blue surgical covering. Officer Wilson, almost unrecognizable in isolation gear, stood nearby. "Max," Lily whispered, a smile breaking through her discomfort for the first time in days. She extended her hand weakly, and the German Shepherd gently nudged it with his nose. What happened next astonished everyone in the room. Lily, who had been too uncomfortable to rest properly, closed her eyes and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep with her hand still resting on Max's head. For 15 precious minutes, she slept without the restless movements and distressed murmurs that had characterized her fever-induced discomfort. When it was time for Max to leave, the dog seemed reluctant to move, looking between Lily and Officer Wilson as if seeking permission to stay. It took a firm command to get him to back away from the bed. "Her vitals stabilized during the visit," the nurse noted, checking the monitors. "Pulse, respiration, even her blood pressure improved slightly." Doctor, who had been observing from the doorway, made rapid notes. "The physiological response is measurable. This goes beyond psychological comfort." That night Lily's fever broke. By morning, she was asking for apple juice and Mini Max, who had fallen to the floor during the night. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. "Sometimes the body just needs a reason to fight harder," Doctor suggested when Sarah mentioned the timing of Max's visit. "Medicine is as much art as science, and there are things we still don't fully understand about healing." Over the following weeks, Max's visits became a regular feature of Lily's treatment. Initially scheduled once weekly as part of Doctor's study, they were soon increased to twice weekly as the medical staff noted Lily's improved mood and physical responses following each interaction. The hospital made an exception to their usual policies, creating a special ID badge for Max that hung from his collar whenever he visited. Other children in the oncology ward began looking forward to his visits as well, and soon Doctor expanded her study to include all pediatric cancer patients who wished to participate. Officer Wilson arranged his shifts around these hospital visits, his superiors at the police department supportive once they understood the circumstances. What had begun as compassion was evolving into something more structured, the first threads of a formal therapy dog program taking shape around Max's interactions with Lily and the other children. On a crisp November morning, 6 weeks into Lily's treatment, Sarah stood in the hospital courtyard watching as Lily, bundled in a puffy coat and wearing a knitted rainbow hat that covered her now bare scalp, threw a soft ball for Max. The German Shepherd retrieved it carefully, placing it directly in Lily's hands rather than dropping it at her feet as he would normally do. "He understands she's not strong enough to bend down," Officer Wilson observed, standing beside Sarah. "I've never seen him adapt his behavior like this for anyone else." Sarah nodded, watching as her daughter, still pale but with bright eyes and a genuine smile, praised Max with the confidence of someone much older. 2 months ago, she barely spoke. Now listen to her. Indeed, Lily's vocabulary had expanded dramatically. Her speech therapist attributed it to her desire to communicate with Max and the other children in the oncology ward. What had been delayed development was rapidly catching up as Lily found her voice. "Doctor says they're making progress with the detection study," Officer Wilson mentioned. "Max has accurately identified leukemia samples with 94% accuracy in blind tests. They're talking about expanding to other forms of cancer." Sarah felt the familiar mixture of grief and pride that had become her constant companion. Her daughter's illness had opened a door to something that might help countless others, but the cost was higher than any mother should have to pay. "Sometimes I think he knew before any of us," Sarah said softly. "At the fair, he recognized something wrong before there were even clear symptoms. If we could train more dogs to do what Max did instinctively." She left the thought unfinished as Lily called out, "Mommy, watch." The little girl was demonstrating how she had taught Max to spin in a circle on command, her delighted laughter rising in the autumn air like a promise, a sound that had seemed impossible in the dark days following her diagnosis. In that moment, watching her daughter play with the dog who had quite possibly saved her life, Sarah allowed herself to believe that they would find their way through this shadow valley to whatever light waited beyond. Doctor stood before an audience of skeptical medical professionals in the Memorial Hospital auditorium, her presentation slides illuminating the dimmed room. 3 months into her study with Max, she was presenting preliminary findings to the hospital's research committee and invited guests from nearby medical institutions. "The data speaks for itself," she said, gesturing to a graph displaying detection accuracy rates. In controlled blind tests, the subject, a trained police dog with no prior medical detection experience, has consistently identified samples from patients with acute lymphoblastic leukemia with 94% accuracy. For comparison, some of our current screening methods have lower sensitivity rates in early-stage detection. From the back of the room, a distinguished oncologist raised his hand. "Doctor, while your results are certainly interesting, how do you account for the possibility of handler influence? Perhaps Officer Wilson is unconsciously cueing the dog." Had anticipated this question. "Fair concern, Doctor. That's why in Phase 2 of our testing, Officer Wilson was not present in the room during blind trials. The dog was handled by a research assistant with no knowledge of which samples were positive. The accuracy remained consistent at 91%. She advanced to the next slide, showing Max in the hospital with Lily Parker, both connected to monitoring equipment. Beyond detection capabilities, we've documented physiological responses in both the child patients and the dog during therapeutic interaction sessions. Heart rate variability, cortisol levels, and immune markers show statistically significant improvements in the children following these sessions. As questions continued, Officer Wilson shifted uncomfortably in his seat at the side of the auditorium. The scientific terminology washed over him in waves of unfamiliar jargon. He was a police officer, not a researcher, but he understood one thing clearly. Max was helping Lily and other children in ways that transcended conventional medicine. After the presentation, as attendees networked over coffee, Doctor approached Officer Wilson. Quite remarkable, isn't it? To see something we've observed anecdotally now backed by empirical data. Officer Wilson nodded. How is Lily doing? I haven't seen her since Tuesday. She's responding well to the adjusted protocol, Doctor replied. Her latest blood work shows promising results. If this trend continues, we might be able to reduce treatment intensity by the 6-month mark. Across the room, Doctor was engaged in animated conversation with a woman Officer Wilson didn't recognize, middle-aged with a sharp gaze and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. James, Doctor called, waving him over. I'd like you to meet Doctor from the National Institutes of Health. She's interested in expanding our research to a multi-center study. Doctor extended her hand. Officer Wilson, your work with Max has caught significant attention. The NIH has been monitoring canine medical detection research for years, but your case offers something unique. A detection dog who identified a condition he wasn't specifically trained to detect, and did so at an exceptionally early stage. Officer Wilson shook her hand, suddenly aware of his uniform among all the lab coats and business attire. Max is the remarkable one, ma'am. I'm just the guy holding the leash. Doctor smiled. Sometimes the most significant breakthroughs come from unexpected sources. We'd like to explore whether other working dogs might have similar latent abilities that could be formally developed through training. Would you be willing to bring Max to Washington next month? We have specialized equipment that could help us understand exactly what chemical compounds he's detecting. The implications were staggering. What had begun with a chance encounter at a small-town fair was now drawing attention from one of the nation's premier research institutions. Later that evening, Officer Wilson visited Lily's hospital room, where she was undergoing her weekly chemotherapy session. Sarah sat nearby, reading aloud from a picture book while Lily dozed. Max, now a familiar presence in the pediatric oncology ward, settled quietly beside Lily's bed, his vigilant gaze rarely leaving her face. How did the presentation go? Sarah asked, keeping her voice low to avoid disturbing her daughter. They want to take the research national, Officer Wilson replied, still processing the day's events. Someone from the NIH was there. They want Max and me to go to Washington for advanced testing. Sarah's eyes widened. That's incredible. Officer Wilson glanced at Lily. It would mean we'd be away for at least a week. I wasn't sure if Max should miss his visits with Lily. Sarah completed his thought. James, what's happening here goes beyond just one child. If Max can help researchers understand how to detect cancer earlier in other children, Lily would be the first to insist he go. As if sensing they were talking about him, Max raised his head, looking between the two adults with intelligent eyes. Did you know, Sarah continued, that doctor has started preliminary screening for all high-risk children using the protocol developed from Max's responses. 2 new cases were caught at very early stages last week. 2 families who won't have to go through what we did. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors and Lily's soft breathing. In the 3 months since her diagnosis, the little girl had endured more than most adults face in a lifetime. The harsh medications, the nausea, the fatigue, the temporary loss of her immune system, and the disappearance of her once thick brown hair. Yet through it all, her bond with Max had provided not just comfort but measurable physiological benefits that the researchers were only beginning to understand. 2 days later, Doctor brought additional news. The hospital board had unanimously approved funding for a formal therapy dog program, inspired by Max's success. More significantly, they were establishing a canine medical detection research center in partnership with the university, and with backing from several pharmaceutical companies interested in developing new early detection protocols. We're calling it the Max Protocol, Doctor explained as she, Officer Wilson, and Sarah walked through the hospital garden while Lily napped. A systematic approach to training detection dogs specifically for early-stage cancer identification. The preliminary research suggests this could improve early detection rates by up to 30% when used alongside conventional screening methods. The Max Protocol, Officer Wilson repeated, the name settling strangely in his ears. He's just doing what comes naturally to him. That's precisely what makes it so valuable, Doctor replied. Max demonstrated this ability without specific training. If we can understand how and why, we might be able to select and train other dogs with similar natural aptitudes. As winter descended on, transforming the hospital garden into a landscape of crystalline beauty, Lily reached a significant milestone, her halfway point in treatment. Doctor was cautiously optimistic, pointing to her latest test results with a smile that reached his usually reserved eyes. The cancer is responding exceptionally well, he told Sarah during their weekly consultation. Her blood counts are moving in the right direction, and the bone marrow biopsy shows minimal residual disease, far better than we typically see at this stage. Sarah clutched Lily's latest lab report, the columns of numbers and medical terminology now familiar after months of intense education in childhood oncology. So she's really getting better. We still have a long road ahead, Doctor cautioned, but yes, she's responding remarkably well. I believe we're on track for complete remission. That evening, Sarah sat on the edge of Lily's hospital bed, brushing her fingers over the soft fuzz that had begun to reappear on her daughter's scalp, new hair growing in wispy and delicate, a physical manifestation of healing. "Mommy," Lily said, her vocabulary now expansive and her sentence structure increasingly complex, "when I get better, can Max come live with us?" Sarah smiled, caught between laughter and tears. "Oh, sweetheart, Max is a working dog. He has an important job with Officer Wilson." Lily considered this, her forehead furrowing in thought. "But he has an important job with me too." Sarah couldn't argue with that simple truth. In the sterile world of medical protocols and clinical trials, something profound and unmeasurable had emerged. A connection between a child and a dog, that scientific explanation even as it generated groundbreaking research. Outside the hospital window, snow began to fall, each unique crystal catching the light before joining the growing blanket below. Inside, wrapped in the cocoon of modern medicine and ancient animal-human bonds, Lily Parker slept peacefully, one hand curled around Minimax, dreaming perhaps of spring and recovery, and running through green fields with a German shepherd at her side. Spring arrived with an explosion of cherry blossoms and renewed hope. 6 months into Lily's treatment, Doctor confirmed what her improving blood work had been suggesting. She was in remission, though 2 more years of maintenance therapy lay ahead to ensure the cancer wouldn't return. The most intense phase of treatment was behind them. On a bright April morning, Lily was temporarily discharged from the hospital to attend a very special event, the groundbreaking ceremony for the Center for Canine Medical Detection. The local news had arrived to cover the story that had captivated first the town, then the medical community, and now the nation. Lily, still thin but with new wisps of chestnut hair visible beneath her rainbow hat, stood proudly beside Officer Wilson and Max, her small hand resting on the German shepherd's back. Sarah watched from nearby, scarcely believing the transformation from the day at the fair 7 months earlier. Her quiet, speech-delayed daughter now spoke clearly and confidently to the reporter interviewing her. "Max saved my life," Lily said with the simple directness of a child. "He smelled my sickness before the doctors knew it was there." The camera panned to Max, sitting regally in his police K9 vest embellished with a new patch, a red medical cross alongside the police shield, symbolizing his dual role in law enforcement and medical detection. Doctor, now the director of the new research center, addressed the gathered crowd. What began as an extraordinary interaction between one child and one remarkable dog has evolved into a scientific breakthrough with implications for early cancer detection worldwide. The MAX protocol, named after our pioneering canine partner here, has already identified 17 cases of early-stage cancer in children who showed minimal or no clinical symptoms. Officer Wilson stood at attention during the ceremony, but his thoughts drifted to the journey of the past months. The week at the NIH laboratories had been transformative. Using advanced equipment, researchers had identified specific volatile organic compounds in cancer patients' breath and blood samples that MAX was detecting. This discovery had led to the development of both improved training methods for detection dogs and new electronic sensing devices, modeled on canine olfactory capabilities. As Doctor continued her speech, Officer Wilson felt a tug on his uniform pants. He looked down to find Lily gazing up at him. "Max needs water," she whispered. "He's thirsty." Officer Wilson blinked in surprise. Max showed no obvious signs of thirst that he could detect, yet when he offered his partner water from a collapsible bowl, the German Shepherd drank eagerly. Somehow, Lily had perceived a need in the dog that even his handler had missed. The ceremony concluded with Lily, Officer Wilson, and Max turning ceremonial shovels of dirt where the research center would stand. Construction would take a year, but temporary facilities were already operational in the hospital's West Wing, where Doctor and her growing team worked to refine and expand the MAX protocol. Later that afternoon, as Sarah prepared to take Lily back to the hospital for her scheduled treatment, Doctor from the NIH approached them. "Mrs. Parker, I wonder if we might speak privately," she asked. Sarah nodded, asking Officer Wilson to stay with Lily for a moment. Doctor led Sarah to a quiet corner of the garden. "We've been analyzing the data from Max's interactions with Lily and the other children in the program. There's something remarkable happening that goes beyond the detection capabilities we've been focusing on." Sarah waited, sensing the researcher's excitement beneath her professional demeanor. "The children who have regular contact with Max show improved recovery metrics across multiple measures, better response to chemotherapy, reduced side effects, stronger immune function. We initially attributed this to psychological benefits, reduced stress, improved mood, but the data suggests something more." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked. "We believe there may be a biochemical component to the therapeutic interaction, something in the dog's presence, perhaps pheromones or other biological signals, that specifically supports immune function in humans with certain conditions." Doctor paused. "With your permission, we'd like to include Lily in a new study focused on this aspect. It would involve more frequent interaction with Max, along with additional monitoring and blood work." Sarah glanced across the garden, where Lily was demonstrating to Officer Wilson how she could now stand on one foot, a small milestone in her returning strength that filled her mother with inexpressible joy. "Will it help other children?" Sarah asked. "If our hypothesis is correct, it could lead to significant improvements in supportive care during cancer treatment. Not just dogs visiting hospitals, but a structured therapeutic approach with measurable medical benefits." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Then we'll do it." The new research protocol began immediately. Max's visits with Lily increased to 4 times weekly, with each session carefully monitored and documented. Additional children in the oncology ward were invited to participate, their parents eager for anything that might ease their children's suffering. What emerged over the following weeks surpassed even doctors' optimistic projections. Children in the canine therapy program showed a 23% reduction in nausea during chemotherapy, improved white blood cell counts, and significantly fewer infections compared to the control group. Most remarkably, their emotional resilience, measured through psychological assessments and stress hormone levels, showed profound improvement. The research team expanded to include immunologists, endocrinologists, and all working to understand the mechanisms behind what they now termed the Max effect. Preliminary theories suggested a complex interplay between the psychological benefits of animal interaction and actual biochemical responses triggered by compounds present in the dog's saliva, breath, and skin cells. For Lily, the science behind her bond with Max was less important than the simple joy of his presence. As spring deepened into summer, her strength returned steadily. Hospital stays became less frequent, and she began attending a special kindergarten program for children with medical needs, making friends beyond the confines of the oncology ward. On a warm June evening, Sarah and Officer Wilson sat on a bench in the hospital garden, watching as Lily and Max played a gentle game of fetch on the lawn. "The department has officially modified Max's duties," Officer Wilson said. 3 days a week for police work, 2 days for the hospital program. It's unprecedented, but the chief couldn't argue with the results. Sarah nodded, watching as her daughter laughed, a sound that had once seemed like an impossible dream in the darkest days of diagnosis and treatment. "Doctor says she's the strongest responder in her treatment group," she said. "Her blood work is consistently excellent. He's talking about reducing her maintenance therapy timeline if the trend continues." Officer Wilson smiled. Max knew. Somehow from the beginning he knew. They fell into comfortable silence, these two people brought together by extraordinary circumstances, their lives now permanently intertwined through a child and a dog. Across the lawn, Lily had stopped throwing the ball and was sitting with Max, her arms wrapped around his neck in a gentle hug. The German Shepherd remained perfectly still, his usual alert posture softened in the little girl's embrace. "You know," Sarah said finally, "before all this happened, I was so worried about Lily's development, her speech delay, her shyness. I kept comparing her to other children, pushing for more therapy, more intervention. Now," she shook her head, "now I just marvel at who she is, how strong, how remarkable." Officer Wilson nodded. "She has an extraordinary gift with Max. Doctor says she communicates with him in ways that even experienced handlers can't match." As the sunset painted the garden in hues of gold and pink, a hospital administrator approached with a photographer from the local newspaper. "Mrs. Parker, Officer Wilson," she said, "would you mind if we took a few photos for the fundraising campaign? The new research center has received national attention, and Lily and Max have become quite the symbols of our program." Sarah hesitated, protective of her daughter's privacy, yet aware of the importance of the research their story had sparked. "Just a few," she agreed finally. As the photographer captured images of Lily and Max in the golden evening light, neither child nor dog seemed aware of the camera. They existed in their own world of perfect understanding, the little girl whose life had been saved, and the dog who had somehow known what humans could not detect. Later, when the photo appeared on the front page of the Gazette, it would capture the essence of their connection in a single frame. Lily whispering something in Max's ear, her eyes bright with life and health, the German Shepherd's expression almost human in its attentiveness. The headline would read, "The Whisper That Started a Medical Revolution." 1 year after Lily's initial diagnosis, the Center for Canine Medical Detection was no longer just a construction site, but a functioning facility with temporary offices in the hospital's West Wing. The research team had expanded to include specialists from across the country, all drawn by the promising results of the Max protocol and the therapeutic applications being developed alongside it. On a crisp September morning, Lily sat in doctor's office for her 1-year follow-up examination. Now 4 years old, she swung her legs from the examination table, her rainbow-striped socks bright against the sterile white paper. Her hair had grown back in chestnut waves, though shorter than before, and her cheeks had regained their healthy color. To casual observers, she looked like any other preschooler, active, curious, and increasingly independent. Sarah watched as Doctor completed his examination, his movements gentle and thorough. After a year of treatments, hospital rooms, and medical procedures, Lily had developed a remarkable patience for these routine checkups. "Everything looks excellent," doctor said, smiling at Lily. "You've been so brave through all of this. How do you feel?" "I feel good," Lily replied confidently. "Max says I'm getting stronger every day." Doctor raised an eyebrow at Sarah, who shrugged slightly. Lily had begun attributing thoughts and observations to Max, speaking of him as if they shared a private language. The child psychologist on the research team found it a fascinating coping mechanism, the dog becoming both protector and voice for Lily's intuitive understanding of her own recovery. "We'll need to wait for the blood work results," doctor continued, addressing Sarah, "but based on the physical examination and Lily's recent tests, I'm very pleased with her progress." As they left the examination room, they encountered Doctor in the hallway, engaged in animated conversation with a distinguished-looking man in a tailored suit. She waved them over. "Sarah, Lily, perfect timing. I'd like you to meet Dr. Richard Thornton from the American Medical Association. He's here to evaluate our research program." Dr. Thornton smiled politely, though his eyes held a reserve that Sarah had come to recognize in certain medical professionals, the careful skepticism of someone who respected data over anecdotes. "Mrs. Parker, it's a pleasure to meet you and Lily. Your case has generated significant interest in the medical community." "Our case," Sarah repeated, a note of protectiveness entering her voice. Dr. Thornton seemed to register her concern. "I apologize. That sounded clinical. What I meant was that the circumstances of Lily's diagnosis and the subsequent research have implications that extend far beyond. The AMA is considering formal recommendations regarding canine detection and therapy programs based on the protocols developed here." Lily, who had been listening quietly, suddenly asked, "Where's Max today?" Doctor answered, "He and Officer Wilson are working with some new dogs in the training program. Would you like to see them after your appointment?" Lily nodded eagerly. Over the past year, she had become something of a fixture at the research center, often observing training sessions and sometimes even participating in demonstrations for visitors. Her intuitive understanding of the dog's behavior had proven valuable to the trainers working to replicate Max's detection abilities in other canines. Later that afternoon, Sarah and Lily made their way to the hospital's East Wing, where a section had been temporarily converted for dog training. Through a glass observation window, they could see Officer Wilson working with Max and two younger dogs, a black Labrador and a Belgian, all three focused intently on a series of containers arranged on the floor. Lily pressed her hands against the glass, watching as Max correctly identified a sample, then stepped back while the training dogs took their turns. The Labrador hesitated, moving between samples before finally sitting beside the correct one. The, however, seemed distracted, sniffing the air instead of focusing on the containers. "Something's wrong," Lily said suddenly, her voice sharp with concern. Sarah followed her daughter's gaze to Max, who appeared normal to her, alert and focused as always. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Before Lily could answer, Max suddenly turned away from the training exercise, moving to the far corner of the room and pawing at the floor in an uncharacteristic display of agitation. Officer Wilson called a command, but the German Shepherd ignored him, continuing his distressed behavior. Doctor, who had been observing from inside the training room, opened the door with a concerned expression. "Sarah, is everything all right? Max just completely disengaged from training." "Lily says something's wrong with him," Sarah explained, feeling slightly foolish even as she said it. Doctor looked thoughtfully at Lily. "What do you think is wrong, Lily?" "His head hurts," Lily said with absolute certainty, "behind his eyes." The specificity of the description sent a chill through Sarah. How could Lily possibly know such a thing? Officer Wilson had approached Max, who now allowed himself to be led from the training room, though his movements seemed stiff and uncomfortable. The training session was temporarily suspended as Doctor arranged for the veterinarian who worked with the program to examine Max immediately. 2 hours later, Sarah received a call from Officer Wilson. His voice was tight with emotion. "The vet found something," he said without preamble. "A mass behind Max's right eye. They're doing more tests, but—" He paused. How did Lily know? Sarah had no answer. The connection between her daughter and the dog who had saved her life had always transcended normal explanation. But this was something else entirely. A reversal of roles, the child somehow sensing what was wrong with the dog. The following day, the veterinary neurologist confirmed the worst fears. Max had a brain tumor, likely malignant based on its location and appearance on the scans. The prognosis was guarded at best, terminal at worst. "There are treatment options," the veterinarian explained to Officer Wilson and the research team. "Surgery is possible, though risky given the location. Radiation therapy might help reduce the size and manage symptoms." The irony was bitter and profound. The dog who had detected cancer in a child now faced his own cancer battle. News spread quickly through the hospital and research center, casting a pall over the program that had brought hope to so many. That evening, Sarah found Lily sitting quietly on her bed, holding Mini Max, the stuffed German shepherd that had accompanied her through countless treatments. "Sweetheart," Sarah began gently, "Officer Wilson called. Max is sick." Lily nodded. "I know. He has a bad thing in his head, like I had a bad thing in my blood." Sarah sat beside her daughter, once again struck by the child's intuitive understanding. "The doctors are going to try to help him, just like they helped you." Lily considered this, her expression serious beyond her years. "Can I see him?" "Officer Wilson says Max needs to rest right now, but maybe in a few days." Lily shook her head with sudden vehemence. "No, I need to see him now. I can help." Something in her daughter's certainty gave Sarah pause. Over the past year, she had learned to trust Lily's unusual connection with Max. Making a decision, she reached for her phone and called Officer Wilson. Against medical advice, but with the research team's cautious support, Max was brought to a quiet room in the hospital the next morning. The German shepherd moved slowly, his usual alertness dimmed by pain medication. Officer Wilson led him to where Lily waited, sitting cross-legged on a blanket spread across the floor. "Hi, Max," Lily said softly, patting the space beside her. To everyone's surprise, the dog immediately settled next to her, resting his head in her lap with a deep sigh. Lily placed her small hands on either side of his face, her touch gentle but purposeful, and began whispering to him, words too quiet for the adults to hear, a private communication between child and dog. Doctor, watching from the doorway, whispered to Sarah, "Whatever happens, this connection they share is remarkable. We've been studying the physiological effects of Max's presence on Lily and the other children, but we've never really considered the reverse, how they might affect him." For an hour, Lily sat with Max, sometimes speaking quietly, sometimes simply holding him. When it was time for him to return to the veterinary hospital, she kissed his muzzle and said clearly, "You'll get better, just like me." The adults exchanged glances above her head, none willing to contradict the child's hopeful proclamation, yet all aware of the veterinary neurologist's somber prognosis. The bitter irony of the situation hung unspoken in the air, that the dog who had given so much hope to others might now be beyond help himself. The diagnosis hit the medical community like a physical blow. Max, the pioneering dog whose extraordinary abilities had launched a medical revolution and saved countless lives, was facing his own battle with cancer. The tumor behind his right eye was aggressive, already causing pressure on his brain that explained the headaches Lily had somehow sensed. Doctor flew in from Washington immediately upon hearing the news. "We need to approach this with the same innovation we've applied to human patients," she insisted during an emergency meeting with the veterinary specialists and research team. Max isn't just any dog, he's the cornerstone of a breakthrough that's changing medicine. We owe him our best efforts. The veterinary neurologist, Dr. Abigail, spread Max's brain scans across the conference table. The tumor location makes traditional surgery extremely high risk. Even with the most advanced techniques, the probability of severe neurological damage is significant. Officer Wilson sat silently at the end of the table, his face haggard from sleepless nights spent at Max's side at the veterinary hospital. The German Shepherd had been his partner for 5 years, but in the past year, Max had become something more, a pioneer, a healer, a bridge between animal instinct and medical science. What about the experimental treatment protocol from Doctor suggested? The targeted immunotherapy that's showing promise in canine brain tumors. Doctor nodded slowly. It's still in trials, but given Max's unique situation, we might secure compassionate use approval. I'll make some calls. As the medical team debated treatment options, Sarah faced a different challenge, explaining the situation to Lily. At 4 years old, her daughter had already endured more than most adults: the trauma of her own cancer diagnosis and treatment, the physical toll of chemotherapy, the psychological impact of facing mortality at such a tender age. Now she had to understand that the dog who had saved her life might lose his own. "Is Max going to heaven?" Lily asked that evening as Sarah tucked her into bed. The directness of the question caught Sarah unprepared. "The doctors are working very hard to help him," she answered carefully, "just like they worked hard to help you." Lily considered this, her expression solemn. "But they don't know how to make him better." It wasn't a question, and Sarah felt a chill at her daughter's perception. "They're trying new medicines and treatments. Everyone is doing everything possible." "I know what will help him," Lily said with sudden conviction. "He needs me like I needed him." The next morning, Sarah spoke with Doctor about Lily's insistence. She believes she can help Max. "I know it sounds irrational, but given the connection they share." Doctor exchanged glances with Doctor. "Actually, we've been discussing something similar. Our research has focused on how dogs like Max affect human patients, but we've gathered some preliminary data suggesting a reciprocal effect. The biochemical markers we measure in the children, stress hormones, immune factors, neurotransmitters, show patterns that seem to be mirrored in the dogs during interaction sessions." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked. "We're hypothesizing that the therapeutic relationship might be bidirectional," Doctor explained. "If Max's presence produces measurable physiological benefits for the children, it's possible that their presence, particularly Lily's, might produce similar benefits for him." Doctor nodded. "We'd like to include regular interaction with Lily as part of Max's comprehensive treatment plan, alongside the medical interventions. From a research perspective, we'll monitor key biomarkers to document any measurable effects. From a compassionate care perspective," she paused, "well, they clearly draw comfort from each other's presence." And so began an extraordinary reversal of roles. Max, who had visited Lily throughout her cancer treatment, now received visits from her during his own. The veterinary hospital created a special room where they could interact, equipped with monitoring devices that tracked everything from Max's heart rate variability to his cortisol levels before, during, and after Lily's visits. Officer Wilson, initially skeptical of the approach, couldn't deny the visible change in Max when Lily arrived. The German Shepherd, increasingly lethargic as the tumor grew, would rally in her presence, his eyes brighter, his movements more fluid, his engagement with his surroundings markedly improved. "It's not just psychological," Doctor remarked after reviewing 2 weeks of data. "His pain marker indicators decrease by an average of 27% during and immediately following Lily's visits. His inflammatory markers show similar improvement. Something measurable is happening here." Meanwhile, the experimental immunotherapy had begun. Every 3 days, Max received infusions designed to help his immune system recognize and attack the cancer cells. The treatment was cutting-edge but brutal, leaving him nauseated and weak. Yet he never showed these symptoms when Lily was present, another phenomenon the researchers noted with increasing interest. 6 weeks into treatment, Max underwent another brain scan. The medical team gathered anxiously as Doctor reviewed the images. "This is unexpected," she said finally, comparing the new scans with the originals. "The tumor has reduced in size by approximately 22%. That's a significantly better response than we typically see with this protocol at this stage." Officer Wilson's voice was rough with emotion. "So it's working. The treatment is working." "The treatment is part of it," Doctor replied cautiously. "But I've treated other K-9 officers with this same protocol who didn't respond nearly as well. There's something else at play here." All eyes turned to Doctor, who had been analyzing the correlation between Max's tumor reduction and his interaction sessions with Lily. The data suggests a statistically significant relationship between tumor reduction rate and cumulative time spent with Lily. The more time they spend together, the better his response to treatment. "But how is that possible?" Officer Wilson asked. Doctor shook her head. "We don't fully understand the mechanism yet, but we've documented similar phenomena in human patients, cases where social connection and emotional support correlate with improved treatment outcomes. What's happening between Max and Lily may be an extension of that, perhaps amplified by their unique bond and whatever biochemical processes underlie it." As autumn deepened into winter, Max's condition continued to improve against all medical expectations. The tumor shrank steadily, and the pressure on his brain decreased, relieving his symptoms. His energy returned, and with it, his working drive. By December, he was able to participate in limited training sessions again, though he remained on treatment. On a snowy afternoon just before Christmas, Lily sat with Max in the hospital garden, now transformed into a winter wonderland. The German Shepherd moved with increasing confidence, retrieving the soft toys Lily threw for him with something approaching his old vigor. Sarah and Officer Wilson watched from a distance, their breath-forming clouds in the cold air. "The latest scan shows another 18% reduction," Officer Wilson said quietly. "Doctor is using the word remission now. She says at this rate, Max might be able to return to modified duties by spring." Sarah nodded, watching as her daughter laughed, her cheeks flushed with cold and happiness. "Lily never doubted it, not once. She kept telling me, Max is getting better because I'm helping him get better." "Doctor wants to publish a paper on their case," Officer Wilson continued. "She's calling it Reciprocal Healing in Therapeutic Relationships. Lots of scientific language for something that looks a lot like love to me." The research team had documented everything: the visits, the biomarkers, the correlation between interaction time and tumor reduction, the anomalous treatment response. They had graphs and statistics to support their findings. Yet even with all that data, there remained something inexplicable about the bond between the little girl and the dog who had saved each other. As the snow fell gently around them, Lily knelt beside Max, whispering something in his ear. The German Shepherd turned his head to look at her, his gaze alert and intelligent, the connection between them almost visible, a current of understanding that transcended species, age, and language. "She says they have a deal," Sarah said softly, smiling at Officer Wilson's questioning look. "Max found her cancer, so she had to find his. Fair is fair." In that moment, watching her daughter and the remarkable dog who had changed their lives, Sarah understood that some miracles came disguised as science, and some healing transcended medicine. The research would continue, papers would be published, protocols would be refined, but nothing would fully explain the miracle that Lily and Max had created together, healing each other when medicine alone was not enough. 5 years had passed since that autumn day at the community fair when a 3-year-old girl with a speech delay had stared at a police dog and said 2 words that would change medicine forever. Lily Parker, now a vibrant 9-year-old with chestnut braids and bright eyes, stood at the podium that had been adjusted to her height, facing an audience that filled the grand auditorium of the National Institutes of Health. "I don't really remember being sick," she began, her voice clear and confident. "But I remember Max. I remember how he looked at me like he could see something no one else could see, and in a way he could." In the front row, Sarah Parker watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and wonder. The shy, speech-delayed child had blossomed into an articulate, compassionate young girl with an uncanny understanding of animals and a determination to follow in the footsteps of the researchers who had saved her life, and Max's. Beside Sarah sat Officer James Wilson, now Director Wilson of the International Canine Medical Detection Association, an organization that had grown from the pioneering work to include programs in 17 countries. At his feet lay Max, gray around the muzzle now but still alert and dignified, officially retired from police work but still an active participant in the training program. The Max protocol has now helped doctors find cancer in over 3,000 children before they got really sick, Lily continued, gesturing to the screen behind her where charts displayed the program's impact. And the special therapy developed through our reciprocal healing research has helped more dogs and more people get better together. In the years since Max's remarkable recovery, the research initiated by Doctor had expanded beyond its original scope. What began as a study of canine cancer detection had evolved into a comprehensive exploration of the healing relationship between humans and dogs, yielding insights that transformed both veterinary and human medicine. The Center for Canine Medical Detection, once housed in temporary facilities at the local hospital, now occupied a modern campus at the edge of town. Researchers from around the world came to study and train there, while a steady stream of dogs, from purpose-bred detection canines to ordinary shelter rescues with special aptitudes, underwent assessment and training for medical detection work. The publication of the landmark paper, Reciprocal Healing in Therapeutic Relationships, in the New England Journal of Medicine, had initially been met with skepticism from the medical establishment. The concept that a child's presence could measurably impact a dog's cancer remission challenged conventional understanding. Yet the data was compelling, and subsequent studies had replicated the findings across diverse settings and species. Scientists discovered something called molecular empathy, Lily explained to the audience, using the terminology she had developed for her school presentations. It means that when we bond with animals, our bodies and their bodies start speaking the same chemical language. We can help heal each other. Doctor, now the NIH's Director of Comparative Medicine, nodded approvingly from her seat on the stage. The concept of molecular empathy, the discovery that certain biochemical signals could be exchanged between bonded humans and animals with therapeutic effects, had emerged from the exhaustive analysis of samples collected during Max and Lily's parallel cancer journeys. This discovery had opened entirely new avenues of research in immunology, neuroscience, and oncology. Today, Lily continued, over 500 hospitals have therapy dog programs based on the Max model. These aren't just dogs who visit to make people feel better, though that's important too. These are specially trained partners who work with doctors as part of the healing team. Sarah's thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought them to this moment. After Max's recovery, which the medical literature now cited as the first documented case of reciprocal healing, Lily had thrown herself into learning everything she could about dogs, medicine, and the science behind their extraordinary connection. She volunteered at the research center after school, helping socialize puppies being trained for detection work and sharing her story with visiting medical delegations. "The most important thing we learned," Lily said, her voice growing more serious, "is that healing works best when it goes both ways. The dogs who help detect cancer also need our help to stay healthy. The children who receive therapy from dogs also give therapy back. It's a circle, not a straight line. Max, as if understanding he was being discussed, raised his head and gazed at Lily with the same intense focus he had shown at their first meeting. Though he had been cancer-free for over 4 years, he remained under careful monitoring, his case providing valuable long-term data on canine cancer survivors. The immunotherapy protocol developed for him had since been refined and approved for broader veterinary use, saving countless other working dogs and beloved pets. Next month, Lily announced, scientists from 27 countries will meet at the first International Symposium on Healing at the Center. They'll be sharing new research about how the MAX protocol is being used to detect not just cancer, but Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and even certain infectious diseases before normal tests can find them. Doctor, who had traveled for this special occasion, smiled at the mention of the symposium he would be co-chairing. In the years since Lily's diagnosis, his oncology practice had incorporated the MAX protocol as a standard screening tool for high-risk pediatric patients, identifying dozens of cases that might otherwise have gone undetected until symptoms became severe. "I'm telling you all this," Lily continued, approaching the conclusion of her address, "because sometimes the biggest discoveries happen when we least expect them. Nobody knew that when I said, 'Hi, Max,' at the fair that day, we were starting something that would change medicine forever. We were just a little girl and a dog who somehow understood each other when no one else could." As Lily spoke these words, Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes, not tears of sadness or even relief, but of profound gratitude for the mysterious connection that had saved her daughter's life, and then rippled outward to save so many others. Beside her, Director Wilson discreetly wiped his own eyes, his hand dropping to rest on Max's head. "The doctors tell me I've been cancer-free for 5 years now," Lily said, her voice brightening. "And Max has been cancer-free for 4 years. That means we're both officially considered cured." She paused as applause filled the auditorium. But the most important cure wasn't just for our bodies. It was learning that healing is something we do together, people and animals, doctors and patients, science and love. As Lily concluded her speech, she stepped away from the podium and approached Max. The German Shepherd rose to meet her, and she knelt beside him, their faces level, their eyes meeting in that same extraordinary connection that had first been captured in the now-famous photograph from years ago. "This is Max," Lily said, her arm gently draped across his shoulders. "He's not just a hero dog or a medical miracle. He's my friend. And he taught the world that sometimes the greatest healers have 4 paws." The standing ovation lasted for several minutes. Scientists, doctors, researchers, and government officials rose to their feet, acknowledging not just the remarkable advances being celebrated, but the profound simplicity at their core, that a child and a dog had seen in each other something invisible to sophisticated medical equipment, and in doing so, had opened a door to understanding that transcended species boundaries. As the applause continued, Doctor leaned toward Sarah. "The NIH is establishing a new research initiative," she said quietly. "The Lily and Max Foundation for Medicine, full federal funding with satellite centers around the world. We'd like Lily to serve as the youth ambassador when she's not in school." Sarah watched as her daughter stood confidently beside the dog who had changed their lives, both of them survivors, both of them pioneers, both of them now legends in the medical community. The journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had transformed not only their lives but medicine itself. Outside the NIH auditorium, a bronze statue had been unveiled that morning, a life-size German Shepherd sitting beside a small girl, their eyes meeting in a moment of perfect understanding. The plaque read simply, 2 words that changed medicine: "Hi, Max." In honor of the Parker-Wilson Healing Protocol, 2025. The legacy of that chance encounter at a small-town fair would continue to unfold for generations to come, saving lives across species boundaries, and reminding the world that sometimes the most profound medical breakthroughs begin not in laboratories, but in the mysterious connection between a child who needed healing and a dog who somehow knew.